Welcome to This Week in Coworking, where industry leaders get succinct, actionable insights.
Hey everybody, I'm joined today by Ryan Fogelman, one of the co-founders over at COhatch. Ryan, welcome to the This Week in Coworking.com podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Hector. How are you?
I am doing pretty well. It's a very sunny afternoon at time of recording. We've both had to shift our living situation a little bit just to get the light right. I'm excited for this chat. Thanks very much for joining us.
No, it sounds great. We just got sunlight from the rain. It's a beautiful day in Columbus, Ohio.
That's amazing. Ryan, I wanted to start right at the beginning. You've been doing business pretty much your entire life, building things since you were a kid. So let's start at the beginning of COhatch, right? I think that's where you first touched co-working, and correct me if I'm wrong.
100%.
But what was the COhatch origin story? Tell me about the co-founding, who was involved, what did you guys do, why?
Oh, it's funny because Mesh Fitness was actually the first COhatch, right? So we actually opened a gym, a 13,000 square foot gym. It's really cool. It's called Bridge Park. So in Dublin, Ohio, they put a $30 million walking bridge and like they really built a downtown. There was an old main street and open acreage. They put in 4 or 5 story buildings. And I mean, it was literally a $2 billion investment, probably more, 10 years later. So, we started doing that. Our original founders, so basically you have Joel and Elizabeth who do all of our design work, right? So these guys, they do a lot of amazing taking a design and putting it into the architecture. They're known for that. And they had their own company that was working for that. And then we had Terry Hagendorfer, who had worked for Honda for a long time. He does all our builds. Eric Furch is really our finance and accounting whiz. Matt Davis is our main partner. He's the principal. He owns the largest share of it and is the guy who is driving on a daily basis, but he's now our CEO. When we started, Matt had other gyms with some of our partners, and there was a warehouse. The warehouse was in Worthington in a walkable neighborhood, and you didn't realize how much space there was behind the retail frontage. He found the space. I remember he called me up and we climbed through windows to get to it. We were all there and looking for a spot where we could all work from. So we all, as small business owners, really needed a place to work. And then we realized this is going to cost over $1 million to build, and we better turn this into a business or we're going to be in a lot of trouble. Honestly, it was an accident perspective. I mean, all of our partners, I'm sure, have a little bit of a different from the origin, but the reality is that's where it stemmed from. And it was 15 offices. We had a couple event spaces. We had a kitchen. I think it was 8,000 square feet, but it was built on an old stage that was in a building that had been built in 1850. So that was our start to the historic renovations.
It's just an amazing trajectory from an accidental co-working space. Now, 8 years later, you guys celebrated turning 8 just this week past. How many spaces do you guys currently operate?
We're over 40, so I think it's 44 in development or will be open relatively soon. And then there's always more in the pipeline. We're in Indy, Cincy, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. We're about to do our first in Kentucky, which will be in Covington, which is still Cincinnati metro area. We have 5 in Charlotte. We purchased Huga, so that's where those 5, and there's other plans in development there. We also have 2 open in Atlanta and 4 in the Tampa Bay, Lakeland area.
Just tremendous growth. And obviously there's something that's resonating with members. But what I keep hearing about COhatch is it's beyond just a space. If people haven't met you, what's your role within the COhatch community?
Right. Well, it's funny. Most of my partners would say I do a whole lot of nothing. The reality is I started as our sales and marketing and our strategic partnerships. Early on, what ended up happening was Matt was actually working for a corporation. And so I basically had lived the hustle mentality. I have a law degree and an MBA. I worked for Accenture. I worked for AmericanGreetings.com. I worked for the corporate world. And then I decided around 2018 to start my consulting firm, Conversion Development Group. I became an outsourced VP of business development. I had a bunch of startups that did well or failed or, just as side things, and I had rentals and other things. But really, I was either on the road or working from a Barnes and Noble. I was getting thrown out of Panera after 30 minutes. I would buy coffees just like everybody else. Matt was working in a corporation and getting ready to quit his job and take on this as a full-time gig. We all kind of wore a lot of hats in the beginning. I joke because Matt and I were doing all of our content for Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook for the first 4 years. It was literally him and I. So it was kind of fun. We did have a lot of help from our CMs, but really, the idea, we ended up meeting with someone one, like, so we have a farmer's market in Worthington, which is an amazing farmer's market. It was actually one of the best in the Midwest. And what ended up happening was the association, which happens a lot of times, where you have an association that's not strong financially, but they're running a nation like the farmers market that does really well. We actually created a boost room and gave that to the newest director of that organization to help them get over some of the issues they were having. They became our first boost scholarship, first nonprofit. At that time, we had a give wall. Anyone could use our spaces for free if they were using it to raise money. So we would have a give wall. And I remember Matt and I walked in and there was a Make-A-Wish event that was like painting and wine, and they had raised $14,000 over a weekend. And, so for us, it was like, wow, that's powerful. So we just, as we continued to kind of go down that path, we were helping and supporting a lot of the local nonprofits and associations. Both Matt and my passion was starting businesses. We were working with different entrepreneurs, real small business entrepreneurs, agencies, title companies, not necessarily like the tech, startups. And now we have some robotics companies, we have other types of startups, but really we focus on helping small businesses plant seeds. We do that through teaching them how to use our spaces and teaching them how to use the lifestyle that I used for 20 years to build startups.
If I had to ask what Ryan is most known for or most passionate about, most people would point towards the Boost or the Give Scholarship programs. Could you share a little bit more about what exactly are they? Who can apply for them? How do they work? What's the whole premise behind? Let's start with Boost. Like, what is the Boost program?
I have an MBA in entrepreneurial business. I did it 20 years earlier. When I was in entrepreneurial business school learning about entrepreneurship, a lot of people thought it was a joke. They're like, well, why don't you go out and actually start a business? Inherently, that's not wrong. Fast forward 20 years now, if you go to programs, entrepreneurial business is one of the top programs, that college students really want to learn about. I've always been a sales or marketing person. My goal was always to drive leads, drive eyeballs, and do all those different things. Teaching people how to do that is great. But I did see early on that you would have someone leave a large corporation, they would go start a co-working space, and they would spend a lot of time business coaching. But what ends up happening is not scalable, right? So I can only help so many people. So really what I'm trying to figure out is, how do I get indirect impact? If you look at our organization, neighborhoods bring us in to activate spaces or take a space that was iconic. When you look at the people, what I'm trying to find is the real local nonprofits. We have a nonprofit in Upper Arlington where every volunteer writes nice notes to people. During COVID, they were writing nice notes to people. To me, that's the type of impact that I can actually see and feel. We do have some larger nonprofits, but we're truly trying to stay uber local. So that's what we're helping. So it's not just that we're helping the tech startup. We do have some tech startups, but the goal is for entrepreneurs. I'll give you a little boost. I'm not giving you a scholarship forever. For our Give Scholars, we're looking to help that nonprofit become a profitable nonprofit. We're helping them because I'd rather them spend the money they raise on helping versus on office space. If you have enough room and capacity to handle it, it can be distracting. If you're trying to build a co-working space, following our model actually could hurt you, right? For us, we figured out that fine balance of how many we can give, who we can give it to, how we can make sure that they're going to use it the most. And really, the idea is, how do I empower people to be their best selves? Because I can't help everybody, but all of our members can help everybody, right? And 7 different locations, that's really what's happening now. And it's amazing to see.
It is absolutely amazing to see, and I love sharing stories about COhatch, the Give program, and the Boost Scholarship program through the newsletter. We've loved sharing the interviews that you've been doing. You're interviewing a few of these folks who've gone through the program on a podcast that you host yourself, right? It's called Everyday Entrepreneur. Tell us a little bit more about that podcast and what the objective is for that.
Well, 10 years later or 8 years later, right, I'll pinch myself. If you would have told me that when we started Mesh, we'd have 44 locations, no one would have believed it. But what's really helped us is that we do what we say we're going to do. So from a developer perspective, there's a lot of developers out there that promise something, and then what ends up being the finished product is not what they promised, right? And so we have a good reputation because we've worked with a lot of city managers and city administration to help them. One of their key problems is the incubators, right? If you have an incubator, you're basically giving free rent to these businesses, and you end up having businesses that stay on for a long period of time. I'm not trying to turn my booth scholars into a full-time member. I would love them to be, right? And the goal is for that for sure. But really, it's how are we helping each individual? And everyone's different. So I might have a startup that I can give 5 years, and I might have a startup that we can give 6 months. Let's just say someone loses their job. That's when they need to be co-working. That's when they need to be out doing and looking and trying to evaluate whether they want to be an entrepreneur. So there's so many of those in our locations that it just makes it an easy space for everybody to connect on that. And again, you can't force that, right? Like you can't control it 100%. But if you build the right spaces, and I'm so fortunate that Terry will make sure that every single thing in your location is perfect, then it's like, okay, now how do I teach people how to use the space? Once we teach one, another teaches another. It really is community learning, which is the pinch me. When you look back and see, I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say that there are 50 businesses, for profit, nonprofit, or associations that have built their businesses successfully within our spaces with and without any of our help, right? So when I can say that, then I'm going to go and try to highlight those stories. The first one that I did was with a guy who I helped a lot. He was a college student. His name's Chad Porter. He had started a company that created a wear pack, which was for football games. It's a clear pack that you can wear into the games. If you go to his dorm room, he'll show you pictures of all of his designs on the wall. He did everything. So I gave him a scholarship. We started working through all these different pieces. His story is amazing. He moved to Cleveland. He got funding. Everything he did was through his hard work within our spaces. I have a guy named Mike Nemeth who started in our first location. I knew him for 20 years, but we worked separately. He built a company, exited 2 years ago, and now he works for a big mouse company. So I have him as my second. And then the third was a lady named Deb Papish, who is the most passionate person ever. She runs a nonprofit called the Dublin Education Foundation, and she's always trying to connect dots. So really showing people that to be an entrepreneur, you don't have to necessarily have a for-profit business. You can actually have a nonprofit business, and you still have to do all of the same things.
Absolutely. And I absolutely love this approach where you're telling those stories and highlighting successes of people who've had their own co-working journey. And as you said, it's not all startups, it's not all high tech, it's not what other people think are the types of businesses who use co-working spaces. I adore the stories that you're sharing, and I'm very happy we can amplify the reach of those and tell more people about stories like that. You are also one of those stories, right? You also ended up building not one, but two companies within the structure of the COhatch network. One of them, I can see when you sat down, you had the logo on your shirt. Tell me a little bit more about Fire Rover and how you built a company that helps firefighters put out fires through the internet. How did the co-working space play into that whole business?
I always call it the hustle mentality. I look at hustle in a good way. If you get up every morning and work on your passion, you're going to get beat down. It happens. The reality is like you have to get up every day and you might not know what you're going to do that day, but as long as you do something, right? Now, I call it tactical. A lot of people spend so much time strategy, but like they don't do anything, right? And it's like, with CoHatch, I mean, literally Matt created in his head and on it was really back of napkin, right? I mean, yeah, back of, PowerPoint, but Mesh was a business plan. So, I had a company called Conversion Development Group. I was an outsourced VP of business development. In sales, if you are in sales, you have to make the phone ring. I started working with Fire Rover as a client, which was one of my best friends from high school. He started this. He goes, Fogelman, come up here. I want to show you something. I went up to Detroit and I went to the back of a scrap metal facility. If you're not familiar, the most recycled material is metals. Most of the material that stays out of a landfill is processed by scrap metal and construction. So I went up and I saw that and I was like, oh man, this is cool. They started out as a client and then I turned out to be the first official employee. Unfortunately, Brad passed away in 2019. The two other partners and myself and my business partner owned the sales and marketing side of it. I built it within CoHatch because I would have a meeting for one of my clients. I have a meeting for Fire Rover, then be cold calling. I also started a company called Stick Grip. I was working with inventors and I've always worked with inventors, and inventors I believe, need to stop before they become entrepreneurs. A lot of them invent something, they spend their entire life savings, and then they wonder they're successful, but they don't have any more money. They're running out of funding. When you're desperate and need money, is the last time you should ask for money, right? Because a lot of these guys lose their businesses. I spent so much time doing that stuff that within those four walls, it helped. I used to go to a hub location, which we won. There's a kiosk inside one of the malls here, and it's a COhatch kiosk. And so I used to go show people regrips in the middle of a mall on Black Friday. With Fire Rover, I would have a meeting for sprinkler operators, and they would come in, and designers. So it's all about like all the different layers and levels. And to me, most people look at multiple sources of income as a new thing. I've been doing that forever, right? So that's really something that I'd like to share.
It's absolutely not a new thing in co-working. I guarantee that almost every co-working person I know has multiple hats, multiple businesses. They are trying and hustling for a long time. All the business world is like, focus on that one thing, throw everything you can into it. Life is messy. And maybe that's why people are building multiple streams of revenue. I started writing a newsletter to 6 people. It's now become its own business. I get to have cool conversations like this. We get to work with amazing brands and tell their stories and position them within the market. But my day job is running a tech integration company. So I totally get that, wearing the multiple hats. It's one of those things where I keep hearing in the back of my head, focus, focus, focus. But being in an environment where everyone's working on multiple things, you get that cross-pollination of ideas, cross-pollination of energy, because sometimes the one's not going to be going anywhere, the other one's going. So I totally get that, and I totally appreciate you sharing that. That's a positive thing in a world where hustle culture and multi-focus or multi-hatting is kind of frowned upon in entrepreneurship
Well,
circles.
the reality is that it's a flexible lifestyle where you get up in the morning and you might have responsibilities, but you have to feed your family and yourself. You have to grow and do all these things that everybody wants to do, but they're not going to do unless it's convenient. When I have my Boost scholars and my Give scholars, if they ask for help, it's convenient for my other members to help them. You got to make people feel safe in a location where they feel they are in a positive community. And honestly, that's more important. So like we teach our CMs do a random act of kindness, right? And I know like it gets overplayed, those words, but the actual effort is never overplayed. Everybody likes to be appreciated. Everybody likes to feel that someone cares about them. We're trying to build a community that includes coworkers, office workers, small businesses, agencies, all these different things. We also have two restaurants, bars, gyms. So it's really like, what are all these amenities that everybody wants? And going back to the shared mentality, right? I can't afford $1 million home, but together we can all efficiently afford to use $1 million home, right? So we have a beach house in Florida that Matt's actually down there fixing. But all those different things are amenities that a community can share. One of the things that Matt will always say is that the least thing that you and I have in common is our work. It's all of our personal lives. So if you're in Indy and I'm in, and I'm in Lakeland, and we both have vacationed in the same home in Sandy Pants, our vacation home, then we at least have something to talk about. We know the restaurant across the street, what we did for fishing and all these other things. So it becomes something that ties everybody together.
I was going to say that it's sort of like you're building the village, but then I remember that you're actually in the newsletter this week for trying to build a startup village. Tell me a little bit more about that. You have all these amenities, lake house, gyms. What is the play for the walkable startup village? What is that whole project about? What is the big picture from your perspective?
Yeah. So, like the city of Dublin is basically a suburb of Ohio, and it's the fifth largest jurisdiction in Ohio, right? So, behind Cleveland, Cincinnati, Columbus, and Toledo, it's literally Dublin in itself. If you look at Bridge Park, one side of the river was completely developed, and the other side had all these small businesses. Everyone was afraid that the big bad corporate world was going to come in and take over the other side. In reality, it kind of happened, right? You can't put $2 billion of investment across a river, put a $30 million bridge, and expect that you're still, going to be able to go get a $3 hamburger on a Thursday night, right? So we ended up keeping Brazen Head. We said that we would keep it and we would rehab it. We did exactly what we said we were going to do. Matt put this, the idea together. I think Dublin wants a innovation village, and most of the time, like we always say, that we don't create the content. I'm not trying to create a business consulting firm inside my firm. By the way, I'm not trying to take a percent of all of these startups. We don't take anything. The walkable village has turned into an amazing space. The real idea from an activation perspective is this is the first time that we are looking to create content around all of our members, all the guys who've been successful in their startups. Now I can bring them to a space and we can create actual training and classroom work inside a village. We're redoing 3 homes that'll turn into corporate suites and event spaces, where we have one building that's like the red brick building that we're turning into a 4-story bar. There's a European kiosk outside for coffees and ice creams and others. And then, we're building a COhatch that is going to sit above the tree line, and it'll have like 60 something offices and a huge event space, so you can have events over the river. But the reality is it's all part of a plan for the city of Dublin. They're taking that bridge, expanding it, and putting a 20-foot bridge that you can walk over the trees, right, and like walk all the way to the river and look down. And then they're doing kayaking and all these other things around it to really help the Dublin community. So it's an amazing thing. Like the place that we're in, I used to literally kick golf balls, right? Like it was a driving range. So it really is a pinch me moment, and it'll be built within the next, I'd say, 36 months. Most of it should be in theory done. Matt might agree with me or disagree with me, and he's the guy who's going to basically make it happen. So I would say it's going to be an amazing place for Dublin to show off, for us to really help, hopefully activate. And then if it goes as well as we believe it will, I mean, it'll be a destination for you want to come see it. You come to our innovation village and our global headquarters, and it'll be a fun place to meet people, hang out, and really learn more about the people that you bring to the community during your events. Honestly, it's exciting.
It is very exciting, and I, for one, am going to look at my calendar for about 36 months from now to make sure that we can arrange a drop-in. I'm not a hard hat guy. I want to come when it's all polished and be amazed. So I'm going to wait until then. Hopefully the team at Co will send over some information when it's getting close to that, and we'll arrange a walkthrough.
I'm like you are, right? Until it's finished, it's hard to sell it.
I mean, I'm more the code guy than the actual building guy. That's why
Yeah.
when I started in Coworking, I ran spaces, and I'm like, no, I need to get back to the tech. We need other people to run the spaces. That's not my jam. Having said that, what is my jam is writing code, building things, but also having great conversations like this. Ryan, thank you so much for spending some of your afternoon with me, and for sharing so much with our readers and our listeners. Where can people reach out to you if they want to contact you or learn more about the things you're working on? What's the best way for people to contact you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I have the Everyday Entrepreneur newsletter. I have a fire safety report that has 11,000 folks from the fire safety side of it as well. I just do a ton of articles and all the different things that I do, so it's all right there. Feel free to link in with me. Happy to answer any questions and try to help any way I can.
Amazing. I'll put all those links in the show notes as well. Thanks again, Ryan. I look forward to having you back on. Hopefully not in 36 months, hopefully a little bit earlier than that. But thanks again for joining us today.
No, I appreciate it, Hector. Thank you so much.